Hello, everyone. Hey, this is Professor Mohan here. Welcome to this remote classroom setup. Um, I know that it's kind of different for us here to interact in this new virtual setup. But thank you for your cooperation and support here in this learning process. And I look forward to interacting with you a lot through this virtual setup. Firstly, I just want to say that I hope that all of you are doing well, staying safe and healthy. Um, if I can be of any help to you during this difficult time, feel free to reach out to me. I could try my best to help you if there's anything that you needed from my side. Um, so we will get started here with this lab follow up in a minute. But I like to make sure that every one of you had got a chance to look at my general outline email and Slack message, which I had shared with you all through both Slack and email. Right. So if you have not done so, please pause this video for a second and look at that general outline email or Slack message. For those who have done that already, let me know if you have any questions. You could reach out to me via Slack or email. Also, I like to follow up on the recent grading for the midterm exam that I had released. So, if anyone has a question related to your grade, don't hesitate to contact me through email, as I mentioned in my general outline message there. So feel free to let me know. Feel free to check your Sakai and make sure that your grades are correctly uploaded there. Also, regarding the virtual office hours, a quick follow up. I would have my office hours today, and also would continue to have my regular scheduled office hours. So feel free to schedule it as and when needed. And I look forward to talking to you all virtually again using a setup called Google Meet. Right, so I would most likely send you a Google Meet link when you had scheduled a Google Calendar appointment slot, and in this way we could set up our meeting. Okay, so let's get started today. I like to follow up on the lab that was given yesterday. And I know that many of us really had a lot of progress done yesterday. And some of us have been thinking through. So it's a 2 week lab. So the lab has some interesting parts to it. So we are trying to build an expense tracker system. So the idea here is then, as you might have already noted it down from our earlier discussions, right? So just give me a second here. Let me go back to the document here. So the expense tracker, the idea is we would have the user enter the dollar amount for each day. So day one, they enter a dollar amount. Day two, they enter a dollar amount, so on and so forth. So each day, they calculate their expenses themselves and they enter the dollar amount into our system. And our system uses a linked list to maintain those individual expenses for each day, and it produces some stats, right? So that's the idea of that expense tracker, is manages the expenses and produces some statistical information to the user, right? So they just run some reports. For example, what is the day that the lowest expenses was made, or what's the day that the largest expenses was made, so on and so forth. So one thing that I like to follow up today is in the expenses stub class. The way you would design it, that particular class, is you would have a while loop, like how I had set up here, while true, and then you would say if option is one, then you know that you need to add an expense, right? So in order to add an expense, you need to prompt the user for the number of days. So let's say the user says 10 days, right? So then you loop through that for each day. You would run a for loop basically for the number of days and get the expense for each day, right? So you need to prompt the user to enter the expenses for all the days. So once you've done with getting the expenses for each day, then you simply call the add expense method at that point, right? So add expense is the method that adds an item to the linked list. So really the linked list is going to look like this. So let's say the first time there's an expense for day one, $10. Second day, there's an expense, $20. Third day, $30, so on and so forth, right? So every time a new expense is added, then the linked list is going to have a new node, right? And basically, the rest of the other, once you get to handle the first requirement, then the other functionality would become even more straightforward to you, where you would simply implement if option 2, then you will implement the set of functionalities, then for the other options as well. And then towards the end, you would ask a question, do you want to continue, right? If yes, then we need to continue again this while loop, else we'll simply break, right? So we've done functionality like this earlier in our last previous labs, so you should be familiar how to ask the user to continue or break a while loop, right? So if they say continue, then simply you present the options again, so that the user can make the selection, right? And then things would move forward from there, right? So keep in mind, every time you need to prompt the user to enter an option, right? So if they say yes, then you need to prompt them when they come inside this while loop. Keep in mind, you need to prompt them for the option if they say yes, right? And then things will go down into the other options as you would end up designing. And so this is a brief follow-up. And if you have any other questions related to the lab, I ask that you could reach out to me through Slack or email, and also during the virtual office hours, right? So please don't wait till the end of the 2 week session. You may want to reach out to me as and when appropriate, when you have a question on how to implement the setting. And I'm sure that everyone in our team here will be able to implement this expense tracker, because we have covered this linked list a lot, and every one of you by now should have the proper knowledge to implement this functionality. But that doesn't mean that you cannot have a question. Everyone can have a question, so feel free to reach out to me. It's important that at this particular time, because we don't meet physically, that every one of us would need to be connected virtually. So don't be shy. Feel free to connect with me remotely anytime when you have a question regarding the lab. Okay. All right, well, with that, I'm going to quickly jump onto a new topic today, the so called doubly linked list. It's just a variation of the singly linked list that we have seen earlier, right? So we understand the singly linked list very well. Then the doubly linked list is just another topic, right? It's not a big deal to understand doubly linked list. So I'm going to create a new page here to talk about doubly linked list. Um, so I'm going to write down doubly linked list is our next topic of discussion, and it's just a variation of singly linked list, right? So it's nothing more than doing some variations to a singly linked list that we have seen earlier. And this discussion is based on the section 3.4 in our textbook. I recommend everyone to take up the textbook and do this reading assignment 3.4. and I don't expect to release a slide as such for this discussions because we will use this video clip here primarily to exchange ideas, right? So please take over the textbook and then do the reading assignment 3.4. In this way, you are able to also get the proper knowledge from the textbook side. So what's a doubly linked list, right? And how is it different from a singly linked list? So if you remember, a singly linked list had a structure like this, right? So you have a list of nodes, they were all connected, and then we said the last node was a null node, and then you had a special pointer in head, right? The head pointer was pointing to the first node in a singly linked list. Um, One major limitation in a singly linked list is if we want to traverse through the list in the reverse direction, it's quite costly, right? So you need to go all the way to the end, right? You need to go all the way to the end, then you could reverse the linked list. But even then, it was like quite costly because we need to traverse a lot. There's no way for us to really easily come back, right? So if you want to come back from here, let us say this is my x, and if I want to come back to y and then z, I cannot do this easily in a singly linked list. And then even if we want to do that in a singly linked list, it's going to be quite costly to do that and expensive, right, in terms of the time efficiency. So that's the limitation. I'm going to write that down. Time efficiency for reverse order was costly, right? It's costly or expensive um, in a singly linked list. But in a doubly linked list, hopefully we could avoid that limitation and then do something better. So the idea of a doubly linked list, the structure is going to look like this. So for each node, you have two links. One link going on the forward direction and the other link going in the backward direction. So you have things like this. Right? So you have, and then this guy is going to point to the null again, and then you have two special pointers, the head pointer, and then you have a tail pointer. In the textbook, they called as a trailer and header. So any particular name is fine, right? So it's just a name that we give. So head pointers pointing to the first node, tail pointers pointing to the last node. But what we really gain here is that we could, at any point of time, we could go in both direction, right? So if we were right here, let us say x, y, z, and then let's just call this p. If I want to go through this linked list, I could do p, z, y, x, or I could do x, y, z, p. I could do both of these in a really time efficient manner, right? So that's the idea. And how would I do that? I do that using this chain, right? So there's a chain called next, and there's a chain called previous. For every node, I'm going to write that down here. Every node we have a data, we have a next, we have a previous. So we have three items for each node in that linked list. It's worth recalling that in a singly linked list, we had only two items inside a node, but here we have three items, right? So that's the idea in short about a doubly linked list. And as I said earlier, if we understand singly linked list, we should really be able to understand doubly linked list as well quite easily because we are just doing a variation of a singly linked list, right? So at this point, we should be able to talk about some coding perspective. Now that we talked about theoretically how the doubly linked list works, we will shift our focus to the implementation, and I'm going to walk you through some starter code for today. and at that point you should be able to also do some exercise activity based on the starter code and to practice doubly linked list. Okay.